You can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
But what we're interested in,
borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You want your
you were asked by my colleague. You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by.
What you're watching isn't a debate; it's a standoff. Senator Adam Schiff wasn't asking trick questions. He was holding a mirror up to the Department of Justice and asking the simplest thing an oversight hearing should ever demand: an answer.
Showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly,
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General. I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether he took the money?
All I know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
and,
was she,
Senator Schiff, if you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured by Congress for lying with your egregious...
You can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking...
What we're interested in...
borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You were
asked by my colleague. You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Holman taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI. Will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you support?
You don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is not my decision. I said you can talk to Director Patel.
You don't have to try to.
You think you've got a gotcha with Tom Homan, our borders czar, who's been out there fighting for our country since Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed I believe the American people, should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump
for
trying to impeach him?
I guess the answer is you won't support that request.
After you now know that Joe Biden tried to cover up Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine.
Excuse me. Let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You were asked, have a law degree,
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals career prosecutors just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
attack me later.
career.
What we just saw was not oversight. It was evasion on display. Senator Adam Schiff arrived at the session armed with facts, timetables, and a list of questions aimed at cutting through the cloud surrounding Attorney General Pam Bondi's Justice Department. Instead, he got stonewalling, evasion, and partisan theater. Schiff's dissatisfaction was not about politics. It was about responsibility, something Washington purports to respect but rarely demonstrates. He asked a simple question. If evidence exists that a government official accepted a $50,000 bribe, will it be released? That inquiry should have an equally straightforward response, yes or no. Instead, Bondi turned to personal assaults, accusing Schiff of lying, bias, and hypocrisy. When leaders are unable to answer questions, they attack those who ask them. Bondi's approach demonstrated something more dangerous than hostility, disrespect for supervision itself. Oversight is not optional. It is the method by which democracy checks power. However, throughout her conversation with Schiff, Bondi portrayed the procedure as an annoyance rather than a duty. Each "talk to Director Patel," each "I can't discuss that," was a small step toward normalizing an administration that sees no reason to explain itself. The most powerful element of the hearing was Schiff's calm perseverance, which involved listing every unanswered question. It highlighted the scope of Bondi's refusal to confront ethics violations, political prosecutions, mishandled evidence, career prosecutor firings, and even court order compliance. When the United States Attorney General is unable to confirm that her department is following the law, something basic has gone wrong. This wasn't simply about one person's evasive behavior. It is about a larger pattern that has spread throughout American institutions, a culture of secrecy justified by legal jargon, ongoing investigation, matters before the court, out of my purview. Each term, when used sparingly, safeguards integrity. When used repeatedly, it conceals the truth. Bondi's comments were written in the language of insulation, not law. Schiff's calmness is important to viewers. His method, which was calm, systematic, and fact-based, stood in stark contrast to Bondi's defensive tone. That contrast highlighted why hearings like this are still important. The way authorities respond or refuse to respond reveals who respects and who resents democracy. Schiff was not bragging, he was documenting quiet. At one point, Bondi accused Schiff of seeking 5 minutes of fame. However, oversight is not synonymous with fame. Rather, it is a profession. Her rejection of his role was more telling than any response could have been. It demonstrated that for some in power, scrutiny itself feels like an attack. That worldview changes government from a public trust to a private stronghold. The irony is that Bondi could have easily resolved the conflict. All she had to say was, "We'll review the request for transparency." Instead, she made the decision that every besieged official does. Fight the questioner, not the question. But the more she dodged, the clearer it became that this wasn't simply defensiveness, but terror. Fear of exposure, of accountability, and of sunlight. Schiff's performance in that hearing was not a soundbite, but a record. His concluding summary, which cataloged every unanswered question, left a paper trail that history will remember, even if today's news cycle does not. It served as a reminder that democracy is based on receipts rather than platitudes. So, what will Bondi say? If this hearing is any indication, nothing will be done voluntarily. However, her silence is a response in itself. It conveys to the public that the system she heads no longer feels obligated to justify its actions. That is precisely why this type of inspection is more important than ever. In a democracy, truth is owed to the people rather than those in authority. Schiff's determination that the Department of Justice account for its actions was not political theater. It was the last line of defense against the government transforming into a black box. When officials refuse to answer under oath and every yes or no question becomes a partisan conflict, oversight ceases to be oversight and becomes performance art. Schiff's patience in the face of that opposition reminds us that integrity does not always scream. Sometimes it quietly insists on the truth until silence becomes unbearable. The important question, however, is not how Bondi will respond. The question is whether the people will continue to insist that she do so.